is fundamental.
What's up, everybody? This is DeWitt Scott back again for Literacy Kings, where I'll break down, do a book review. I'll break down important books for the culture as they relate to economics and finance. And this book review is about a really good book that I read. It's entitled Benga, The Rise and Fall of Chicago's First Black Banker by Hayner. And this book is really special. It's really good. It's about a guy by the name of Jesse Binga. It's a biography of a guy named Jesse Binga, who was the first black person in the city of Chicago to own a bank, right? The first black-owned bank in Chicago, and one of the first in the country was the Benga State Bank, owned by Jesse Binga. And Jesse Binga was a person who grew up in Detroit, Michigan, but as he got older, he moved to Chicago as a young man. And he moved to Chicago, he was dirt poor, he had no money, and he knew that he just wanted to be an entrepreneur. He knew he wanted to be in control of his own destiny. So he started with a fruit cart, and he set up shop in downtown Chicago, selling fruit to people on the street as they came by. And that was his beginning. That's how he got started. He was really serious about the idea of using capitalism or black capitalism as a way to save the black community. So one of the chief things that he always preached to people and that he practiced himself was saving. He was serious about saving, about black people getting money and saving their dollars. So when he started his fruit stand in downtown Chicago, he was very intentional about saving, and he did. He saved very well, saved up not a lot of money, but he saved up just enough to the point where he could get himself adequate housing. And then once he got his housing, he started to rent out parts of his apartments or his flat to other people. And this was his first start, that renting out of his own space. The space that he was renting, he was sublet to other people. And that introduced him or got him started in a real estate business. And that's where Jesse Binga sort of began, in the real estate business. He understood the idea that people need shelter, and he used that to his advantage. Now, that sort of real estate start, just subletting these small pieces of the places where he lived, that really got him on the road. He started to really make money and save money. And then he expanded that into what would become a large real estate empire. A lot of things worked in his favor, right? Obviously, he was extremely intelligent. He worked very hard. He had a crazy drive and ambition to be somebody. And that pushed him. The sort of world or societal circumstances that helped him was that this is the early 1900s. And Chicago was a city that was one of the number one stops when it came to the Great Migration. When black people in the South were fed up with the poverty, the Jim Crow, the violence, and the just disenfranchisement they were facing in the South, many of them in the early 1900s, they moved north. And they moved to a lot of different cities up north: Detroit, Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, whatever it may be. But Chicago was one of the central cities. Now, Chicago, as they flooded into Chicago, Chicago became extremely segregated. And there was just one black community in Chicago in the early 1900s where 99% of the black people lived. And at that time, they called it the Black Belt. That was a neighborhood that it was called in Chicago, the Black Belt. Today, as a Chicago citizen who lives on the South Side, we call it the Bronzeville area. Or if you're really from Chicago, we call it the Low End. That Black Belt is where all of the black people, or again, 99% of the black people would come and move into this area. Because of that segregation, right, they didn't have many other options. Black people moving to Chicago didn't have a lot of options. Jesse Binga, being a person getting into real estate, he used that to his advantage. So he would get properties in this area, he would buy them, or he would get contracts to manage them, and then he would just continue to push people, or he would continue to open up places for people to live in this area. That helped him start his real estate business. Now, where he really became a guiding light for the black community was that he was the first real estate agent to start to encourage black people to live outside of this confined black belt. And he would say, hey, I understand that the black community lives here, right? They live between 22nd Street and 47th Street on the south side, in between Dearborn and what's now known as King Drive. But he would actually buy properties and rent them out to black people on the outskirts of that area, sort of challenging these racial norms in Chicago, putting them in all white areas. That was a very dangerous thing. The white people in Chicago did not take to that very well. They caused a lot of trouble for the black people who would move onto that block. A lot of violence, a lot of bombings, a lot of just racist actions. And that really was just the first start. Or I don't even want to say first start. That was actually that was the last way of stopping that rush. When they found out that the violence wouldn't work, Then came what we know as white flight, was the idea that here's a black person that's moving on this all white block. Okay, this is the first black family to move on an all white block. Slowly the white people will start to leave because they see that, oh, there goes the neighborhood. The more black people that will come in, the more white people that will leave, right? And that white flight, where over time you will have an all white block, have one black family. Before you know it, more black families. It's half black, half white. And when it's said and done, it's all black. Jesse Binga was one of the leaders of that. He felt that black people should never ever be forced into segregation. He said we all have the rights, the same rights as anyone else. And you have the money, if you have the opportunity, that you should take it. Did not endear him to the white people in Chicago. His home was bombed 8 times, and his businesses were bombed 6 times because they felt that he was an agent of change. He was somebody who was pushing the racial limits. But naturally, as his real estate business started to expand, he then would grow into banking, right? Because as we know, through real estate, a lot of times you get mortgages through the bank. He felt that he could be like a one-stop shop when it came to real estate, mortgages, and even lending, because he got into personal lending. Built the first black bank in Chicago, right on 36th and State Street, in the heart of the Black Belt. And he was the community leader at that point. Black people looked at him as somebody to aspire to, that they were very excited and very happy about, and they used as a model, as a leader. And he embraced that leadership role. On the sadder note, he got to the point where things started to not go so well for him. And I really believe, just from reading the book, he really is overextending himself. He bought so much real estate. He tried to expand his bank so quickly and so massively that he started to fall behind. And in the midst of falling behind on his financial obligations for keeping up with mortgages, keeping up with repair of the places he owned, he fell behind with trying to keep enough cash reserves in his bank for his depositors. It forced him to do some not so great things when it came to trying to just keep the businesses afloat. And his banking business, with some of these, I don't want to call them shady practices, but they were definitely illegal. Some illegal practices of trying to balance the books, but he was just trying to save the business. That ended up not working because as difficult as that was, the knockout blow came in 1929 with the Great Depression, right? So here's this black man in his black-owned bank with this black real estate sort of background, and the businesses are already barely making it by, and he's doing all these sorts of things underhandedly or under the table, try to keep things afloat. And then the economy crashes, and what we know is the Great Depression, but the worst financial collapse in American history. And that was the final straw. So his bank closed officially in July of 1931. A lot of black people were left out in the cold. They lost their money. A lot of black businesses lost their money. A lot of people lost faith in him. And in the midst of audits and investigations about what was going on with the bank, he ended up being indicted for embezzlement for a large sum of money. And in the trial for the embezzlement, a lot of information came out about what he was doing behind closed doors and all the things he tried to do to keep things alive or keep the business alive. And he ended up being convicted of embezzlement and actually went to prison at the age of 70. He was shipped off to prison, Stateville Correctional Institute here in the state of Illinois. But after 3 years in the penitentiary, he came out and he actually came back to the South Side and he tried to continue his life. He was a deep Roman Catholic and he spent a lot of time with the church while he was rich and after, when things became less fortunate for him. Spent a lot of time in the church and gave his life over to the church at that point. He would die at the age of 86, I believe, in his mid-80s. In the year 1950 is when he passed. And he died as a poor man, didn't have much money. He didn't have the prestige and everything that he had when he was rich. But people still remember him for what he did. Some people have soured his legacy and said that, he was an underhanded man. And there are many people that just said, no, he was a really good man and a really great businessman. He just fell victim to a number of things. Many people believe that if he was white or if he was in charge of a white bank, he would have gotten saved by a larger white institution or by the government, or by him having a black bank in Chicago, in the black belt of Chicago. There was no incentive for any larger bank or more powerful financial institution to come in and save him, help him at least. So it's a really deep book and a good book, a great biography about a person that I didn't know. And just, it gives you a great history of the city of Chicago as it relates to black people and economics and black capitalism. So I recommend it to anybody who is into history, you're into banking, you're into economics, you're into how real estate works, particularly in the early 1900s when we started talking about redlining, restrictive covenants, and the people who push those boundaries, push that envelope for black people to move into different neighborhoods. There's a whole breakdown here about block busting, about white flight and the whole nine. Benga, The Rise and Fall of Chicago's First Black Banker by Hayner. Please check it out. Pass the word. I would like for people to get to know this book a lot more. So if you come across this book and you read it and you like it, you enjoy it, share it with other people so it can become known, because it is really important. But Literacy Kings, Benga, check it out.
Reading is fundamental.